The dust-laden afternoon air hung heavy over Silverwood Creek as Zara Blackwood staggered down from the stagecoach, her wrists bound together with coarse rope that bit into her skin. A year ago, she had been the daughter of a respected Boston doctor. Now, in the summer of 1875, she was being sold to the highest bidder in a frontier town that wasn't even on most maps. The crowd of men gathered outside the saloon jeered as the stagecoach driver shoved her forward. Zara's golden hair, once neatly pinned, now fell in tangled waves around her dirt-smudged face. Her traveling dress, torn at the hem and stained from the journey, had been elegant when she'd left home, believing she was headed to a teaching position in California. "Gentlemen," bellowed Silas Ryder, the man who had orchestrated her kidnapping after the stagecoach was ambushed, "I present to you a rare opportunity. An educated Eastern lady with fine breeding. She can read, write, and even play the pianoforte. A perfect wife for any man with the means to claim her." Zara's eyes darted frantically across the sea of weathered faces, miners, cowboys, and drifters all eyeing her like she was a prized mare. The shame of her situation burned hotter than the merciless sun overhead. She had tried to escape twice during the journey, earning herself a bruised cheek and the tighter bindings on her wrists. "Starting bid is $50, Ryder announced, his voice carrying across the dusty street. Men began to shout numbers, each higher than the last. 75, 100, 150. Zara felt sick as the bidding continued, her future being bartered away by strangers. From the back of the crowd, a tall figure moved forward. The men parted as he approached, his spurs jingling with each deliberate step. His face was partially hidden beneath the wide brim of a black Stetson, but Zara could see a strong jawline shadowed with stubble. He wore a dusty duster coat over a simple shirt, a gun belt slung low on his hips. 200, the stranger called out, his voice deep and measured. Ryder's eyes gleamed. 200 from the gentleman in black. Do I hear 250? Another voice called out, 250. The stranger in black didn't hesitate. $500. A hush fell over the crowd. Even Ryder seemed momentarily stunned. 500 going once. Ryder stammered. The stranger stepped closer, his hand resting casually on his holstered revolver. In the silence, he lifted his head enough for Zara to see piercing blue eyes that seemed to look right through her. "She's my wife now," he stated simply, the finality in his tone brooking no argument. No one challenged him as he tossed a leather pouch toward Ryder, who caught it eagerly. The stranger strode forward and took Zara by the arm, his grip firm but not painful as he led her away from the impromptu auction block. "Name's Isaac Keller," he said quietly as they moved down the street. "And you're safe now, madam. I give you my word." Zara didn't know whether to feel relieved or terrified as she walked beside the stranger who had just purchased her like a piece of property. The only thing she knew for certain was that her life had just changed forever. Isaac led her to a modest-looking livery stable at the edge of town. A chestnut mare was tethered outside, already saddled and loaded with supplies. Without a word, he pulled a knife from his boot, making Zara flinch instinctively. "Easy," he murmured, his voice surprisingly gentle as he cut the ropes binding her wrists. "I'm not going to hurt you." As the bindings fell away, Zara rubbed her raw skin, watching him warily. "Why did you do that back there?" Isaac sheathed his knife and began checking the saddle straps. No decent man would stand by and watch a woman being sold like cattle. "So you bought me instead," she said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. He paused, turning to face her directly for the first time. Up close, she could see he was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps only a few years older than her 22 years. His face was tanned from the sun, with faint lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled more often than his current serious expression indicated. I paid to get you away from there, he clarified. You're not my property, Mississippi. Blackwood. Zara Blackwood. Miss Blackwood. You're free to go wherever you please. Though I wouldn't recommend heading back into town just yet. Zara glanced back towards Silverwood Creek, where several men from the auction were still watching them from a distance. I don't have anywhere to go, she admitted. I was traveling to California for a teaching position when our stagecoach was attacked 3 days ago. Isaac nodded grimly. Ryder and his gang. They've been working this territory for months. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a canteen. Water. Zara accepted it gratefully, realizing how parched she was. After taking several long swallows, she handed it back. Thank you, Mr. Keller. Isaac, he corrected. My ranch is about half a day's ride from here. You're welcome to stay there until you figure out your next move. Zara hesitated, weighing her options. She had no money, no belongings save the clothes on her back, and no allies in the strange territory. The man before her was an unknown quantity, but he had intervened when no one else would. What will people think? A single woman staying at a bachelor's ranch. A hint of a smile touched Isaac's lips. Out here, folks mind their own business if they know what's good for them. Besides, my housekeeper, Mrs. Finch, lives on the property. Your reputation will remain intact. After a moment's consideration, Zara nodded. I accept your offer, Mr. Isaac, though I insist on working to repay your investment. We'll discuss that later, he said, reaching for his horse's reins. Can you ride? Yes. My father insisted I learn. Isaac helped her mount in front of him, his movements respectful and efficient. As they rode out of town, Zara felt the stares of the townspeople following them, and she wondered if she had made the right choice. But as Silverwood Creek disappeared behind them and the vast prairie opened up ahead, she felt something she hadn't experienced in Days Hope. The journey to Isaac's ranch took them through rolling grasslands dotted with wildflowers. As they rode, Zara learned that Isaac had come west from Pennsylvania 5 years earlier after serving in the Union Army during the war. He'd worked as a ranch hand before saving enough to buy his own modest spread 2 years ago. It's nothing fancy, he explained as they crested a hill in the late afternoon. But the land's good, and I've got a small herd started. Below them stretched a green valley with a creek running through it. A modest cabin stood near a stand of cottonwood trees, with a barn and corral nearby. Several dozen cattle grazed on the hillside beyond. It's beautiful, Zara said honestly, taking in the peaceful scene. As they approached the cabin, an older woman emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and she regarded them with curious eyes. Isaac Keller, you've been gone 3 days and you bring back a lady? This is unexpected even for you, she called out. Isaac dismounted and helped Zara down. Mrs. Finch, this is Miss Zara Blackwood. She's going to be staying with us for a while. Miss Blackwood, this is Mrs. Martha Finch, the finest housekeeper in the territory and the woman who keeps me from living like a complete savage. Mrs. Finch's shrewd eyes took in Zara's disheveled appearance, the marks on her wrists, and her travel-stained dress. To Zara's relief, the older woman asked no questions, simply nodding briskly. Well, you look like you could use a hot bath and a decent meal, child. Come inside. The cabin was simple but clean, with a main room that served as both kitchen and living area, and 2 doors leading to what Zara presumed were bedrooms. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and the furniture, though sparse, appeared sturdy and well-made. Isaac, fetch water for the tub, Mrs. Finch instructed. Miss Blackwood will use your room tonight. You can sleep in the barn. Isaac nodded without protest, heading back outside while Mrs. Finch led Zara to a small bedroom. It was spartanly furnished with a bed, a chest of drawers, and a small table with a basin. A worn quilt covered the bed, and a window looked out toward the mountains in the distance. "I've got some clothes that might fit you," Mrs. Finch said. "They belonged to my daughter before she married and moved to Denver. Nothing fancy, mind you, but clean and whole." "You're very kind," Zara said, emotion catching in her throat. After the ordeal of the past few days, such simple kindness felt overwhelming. While Isaac heated water, Mrs. Finch helped Zara wash her hair in the basin, tuteing over the tangles and the bruise on her cheek. When the bath was ready, she left Zara alone to soak in the blessed warmth, the first real comfort she'd experienced since the stagecoach attack. Clean and dressed in a borrowed calico dress, Zara felt more human as she joined Isaac and Mrs. Finch for a simple but hearty dinner of venison stew and cornbread. Despite her exhaustion, she found herself telling them about her life in Boston, her father's medical practice, and her mother's death from influenza 3 years prior. After father remarried, things changed, she explained carefully, not wanting to speak ill of her stepmother. "When I saw the advertisement for a teacher needed in California, it seemed like the perfect opportunity." "How did you end up with Ryder?" Isaac asked, his voice controlled but with an undercurrent of anger that wasn't directed at her. "The stagecoach stopped at a way station. There was a young woman there who seemed ill. When I went to help her..." Zara swallowed hard, remembering the trap. "It was a ruse. They took me and 2 other passengers. I don't know what happened to the others." Isaac exchanged a grim look with Mrs. Finch. "Ryder's been getting bolder. The law's spread thin out here." After dinner, despite Zara's protests that she could help clean up, Mrs. Finch shooed her off to bed, insisting she needed rest. The older woman was right. Zara was asleep almost as soon as her head touched the pillow, lulled by the unfamiliar sounds of the prairie night and the knowledge that, for now at least, she was safe. The next morning, Zara woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee. For a moment, she was disoriented. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back. She rose and quickly dressed in another of the borrowed dresses, this one a faded blue that was surprisingly close to her size. In the main room, she found Mrs. Finch at the stove and Isaac seated at the table, studying what appeared to be a ledger. "Good morning," she said, smoothing her hair self-consciously. Isaac looked up, and for a moment, he seemed struck by her appearance. He quickly recovered, standing as she entered. "Miss Blackwood, did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in days," she admitted. "Please call me Zara. After everything that's happened, formality seems unnecessary." A small smile curved his lips. "Zara, then." Over breakfast, Isaac explained that he needed to check on part of his herd that was grazing in the north pasture. "I'll be gone most of the day. Mrs. Finch will be here, and my ranch hand, Tom, is working in the south field if you need anything." "Actually," Zara said, setting down her coffee cup, "I meant what I said yesterday about working to repay you. I'm not accustomed to idleness." "You don't owe me anything," Isaac insisted. "Nevertheless, I'd like to be useful." Mrs. Finch chuckled. "Let her help me today, Isaac. I could use another pair of hands with the preserving." Isaac relented, and after he left, Zara threw herself into helping Mrs. Finch with the household tasks. They spent the morning making strawberry preserves from berries Mrs. Finch had picked the day before, the kitchen growing warm and fragrant as they worked. "So," Mrs. Finch said as they sealed the last jar, "are you going to ask, or shall I just tell you?" Zara looked up, puzzled. "Ask what?" "About Isaac. Why a handsome young man with a promising ranch is still unmarried at 30. Zara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "It's not my place to pry." Mrs. Finch wiped her hands on her apron. "Well, I'll tell you anyway because you should know. Isaac was engaged about 3 years ago to a young woman from town. She took ill with fever and died a week before the wedding. He took it hard, threw himself into building this place. He's a good man, Zara. One of the best I've known. Zara absorbed this information, thinking of the quiet strength she'd sensed in Isaac. Thank you for telling me. I'm not matchmaking, Mrs. Finch clarified with a wry smile. Just providing context. Now let's start on lunch. Tom will be in soon, hungry as a bear, no doubt. The days fell into a rhythm. Zara helped Mrs. Finch with household tasks and began tending to the small kitchen garden. Her knowledge of plants, gained from helping in her father's practice, proved useful as she identified wild herbs that could be harvested for cooking and medicine. Isaac was often busy with ranch work, but in the evenings, they would sit on the porch, talking as the sun set. He told her about his dreams for the ranch, and she shared stories of Boston and her hopes of still becoming a teacher someday. A week after her arrival, Isaac returned from town with a letter for Zara. He'd taken it upon himself to send a telegraph to her father in Boston, informing him of her whereabouts. Hands trembling, Zara broke the seal and read the brief note. Her father expressed relief at learning she was safe, but explained that he and his new wife had relocated to Europe for his health. He enclosed a bank draft for a modest sum but made no mention of her returning home. Not the news you hoped for? Isaac asked gently, seeing her crestfallen expression. It seems I truly have nowhere to go, she admitted. Father has started a new life that doesn't include me. Isaac was quiet for a moment. You have a place here for as long as you need it. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Zara felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with her disappointment about her father's letter. The following days brought them closer. Isaac began teaching Zara to ride Western style, and she proved to be a quick learner. They rode out together to check on new calves, and he showed her the boundaries of his land, pointing out where he hoped to expand someday. You've built something remarkable here, she told him one afternoon as they rested their horses atop a hill overlooking the property. It's still a work in progress, he replied, but she could see the pride in his eyes as he surveyed his land. The best things usually are, she said softly. Their eyes met again, and this time the moment stretched longer. Isaac leaned slightly toward her before seemingly catching himself and straightening in his saddle. We should head back. Looks like rain coming. As June turned to July, Zara found herself feeling more at home on the ranch than she ever had in her stepmother's house in Boston. She'd begun helping Isaac with his account books, discovering that while he was an excellent rancher, bookkeeping was not his strong suit. Her education proved valuable as she organized his finances and helped him draft letters to potential buyers for his cattle. One evening, as they sat at the kitchen table working on the ledgers, their hands brushed as they both reached for the same paper. The contact sent a jolt through Zara, and when she looked up, she found Isaac watching her, his blue eyes intent. You've been a godsend to this ranch, Zara, he said quietly. I've done very little compared to your hard work. That's not true. You've brought. He hesitated, searching for words. Life back to this place. Before you came, it was just a place I worked. Now it feels like a home again. The tenderness in his voice made her heart race. Before she could respond, there was a clatter at the door as Mrs. Finch returned from visiting a neighbor. The moment broke, but something had shifted between them. July brought intense heat and the threat of drought. Isaac worked from dawn until dusk, moving the cattle to ensure they had adequate water and grazing. Zara took to bringing him lunch in the fields, riding out on the gentle mare he had given her to use. One particularly hot day, she found him by the creek, his shirt soaked with sweat as he worked to clear a blockage that was impeding the water flow to the lower pasture. You'll make yourself ill working in this heat, she chided, dismounting with the lunch basket. Isaac wiped his brow with his forearm. Can't be helped. If that lower pasture dries up, we'll lose good grazing land. Zara set out the food. Mrs. Finch had prepared cold chicken, bread, and fresh lemonade. At least take a break and eat something. Isaac reluctantly stepped away from his work and joined her in the shade of a cottonwood tree. As they ate, she noticed he kept glancing at the sky. "Storm coming," he explained, following her questioning look. "We need the rain, but if it comes too hard and fast after this dry spell." "Flooding," she finished for him, having learned much about the challenges of ranch life. He nodded, his expression grave. "Could be dangerous for the cattle in the lower areas." That evening, the storm rolled in with a fury that took even Isaac by surprise. Rain lashed at the cabin windows, and thunder shook the walls. Around midnight, Tom, the ranch hand, arrived at the door, drenched and frantic. "Creek's rising fast, boss," he reported. "Cattle in the north pasture are getting spooked. Some are heading toward the low ground." Isaac was already pulling on his rain slicker. "I'll come help move them to higher ground." "Isaac, it's too dangerous," Zara protested, fear gripping her at the thought of him out in the raging storm. He turned to her, his expression resolute but gentle. "Those cattle represent our livelihood. I have to try." Before she could argue further, he and Tom were gone, swallowed by the darkness and driving rain. Mrs. Finch put a comforting hand on Zara's shoulder. "He knows what he's doing, child. This isn't his first storm." But as the hours passed and the storm intensified, Zara's worry grew. She paced the cabin, jumping at every crash of thunder, straining to hear hoofbeats over the howling wind. Shortly before dawn, the cabin door burst open. Tom staggered in, supporting Isaac, whose face was pale beneath a gash on his forehead. "Isaac!" Zara rushed forward as they lowered him into a chair. "I'm all right," he insisted, though his grimace belied his words. "Horse slipped on the muddy bank. I took a fall. Saved 3 calves that were caught in the rising water," Tom added. "Stubborn fool nearly drowned doing it." While Mrs. Finch boiled water, Zara carefully cleaned the wound on Isaac's head. Her hands were steady, drawing on memories of assisting her father with minor medical procedures. "You could have been killed," she said softly, her voice tight with emotion. Isaac caught her wrist gently as she worked. "I couldn't lose those calves, Zara. Not after everything we've put into this place." She met his eyes, understanding the "we" had not been casual. Somehow, in the weeks she'd been there, she had become part of the ranch, part of his vision for the future. As dawn broke, the storm began to subside. Isaac, despite Zara's protests, insisted on going back out to check on the herd. She finally relented on the condition that she accompany him. They rode out together, surveying the damage. The creek had overflowed its banks in places, and several fences were down, but the cattle had been successfully moved to higher ground. The ranch had weathered the storm. As they crested a hill, the sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light across the rain-washed landscape. Isaac reined his horse to a stop, taking in the view. "It's still standing," he said with quiet satisfaction. "We made it through." Zara looked at him, this man who had saved her from a terrible fate and brought her into his world. In that moment, with the morning light on his face and the determination in his eyes, she realized she had fallen in love with him. The realization must have shown on her face, for Isaac turned to her, his expression softening. "What is it?" "I was just thinking," she said carefully, "about how grateful I am that you raised your hand that day in Silverwood Creek." His eyes held hers. "Best decision I ever made." They rode back to the cabin side by side, something unspoken but powerful growing between them. In the days that followed, they worked together to repair the storm damage. Zara insisted on helping with the fence mending, learning to handle tools with increasing confidence. Isaac watched her with undisguised admiration as she tackled each new task with determination. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk, Isaac cleared his throat nervously. "I've been thinking," he began, "about your situation." Zara tensed, wondering if he was about to suggest it was time for her to move on. "You've been here nearly 2 months now," he continued, "and in that time you've become essential to this place. To me." Her heart began to race as he turned to face her fully. "I know this isn't the life you planned. You were meant to be a teacher in California, not stuck on a cattle ranch in the middle of nowhere." "Isaac," he held up a hand. "Please, let me finish. I'm not much good with words, but I need to say this." He took a deep breath. "When I saw you that day, being sold like property, something in me couldn't stand by and watch. But what started as a decent impulse has become so much more. I never expected to feel this way again after Eliza died. But Zara, I've fallen in love with you." The simple declaration hung in the air between them. Zara felt tears well in her eyes. "If you want to leave, to continue to California or go elsewhere, I'll understand. I'll help you get there safely. But if there's any chance you might consider staying." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. "Not as my housekeeper or helper, but as my wife. For real this time." Inside the box was a simple gold band with a small pearl. "It was my mother's," he explained. "Nothing fancy, but it's perfect," she whispered, looking up at him with shining eyes. "And yes, Isaac Keller, I will stay. I will be your wife. I've fallen in love with you too." The relief and joy that transformed his face made her heart swell. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and then, gently, he cupped her face in his calloused hands and kissed her. It was a tender kiss, full of promise and hope for the future they would build together. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in the nearest town. Mrs. Finch cried openly as they exchanged vows, and even Tom looked suspiciously misty-eyed. The townspeople, many of whom had witnessed Zara's arrival under such different circumstances, now celebrated the union of the couple who had defied convention and found love in the most unexpected way. As autumn painted the prairie in golds and reds, Zara and Isaac settled into married life. The cabin felt different now, warmer, more alive. They converted the small storage room into a classroom where Zara began teaching the children from neighboring ranches 3 days a week, fulfilling her dream of becoming a teacher while remaining by Isaac's side. On crisp evenings, they would sit by the fire, planning expansions to the ranch and dreaming of the family they hoped to have. Isaac would often take her hand, running his thumb over the wedding band that had replaced the pearl ring, now safely stored for a future daughter, and marvel at how a single decision made in a dusty street had changed both their lives forever. "Do you ever regret it?" Zara asked him one night as they lay in bed, the moonlight spilling through the window. "Spending all that money to buy a stranger?" Isaac propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her with tenderness. "I didn't buy you, Zara. I found you, and I'd do it again 1,000 times over." She reached up to trace the line of his jaw, still amazed that this good man was hers. "I never believed in fate until I met you." "Neither did I," he admitted, lowering his head to kiss her softly. "But now I can't imagine any other path that would have brought us here, together." As winter settled over the ranch, bringing with it cozy evenings by the fire and mornings waking in each other's arms, Zara discovered she was expecting their first child. When she shared the news with Isaac, his joy was boundless. He lifted her in his arms and spun her around the kitchen, much to Mrs. Finch's amused disapproval. "Put that poor girl down before you make her dizzy," the housekeeper scolded, but her eyes twinkled with happiness for the young couple. That night, As snow fell softly outside their window, Isaac laid his hand gently on Zara's still flat stomach. "When I raised my hand that day and called you my wife, I never imagined how true those words would become," he murmured, "or how completely you would change my life." Zara covered his hand with her own. "We saved each other, Isaac, and now we're building something even more precious than this ranch." As they drifted to sleep in each other's arms, Zara thought about the strange journey that had brought her here from a sheltered life in Boston to being auctioned on a dusty street to finding love and purpose on a prairie ranch. It hadn't been the path she had expected, but as Isaac's steady breathing mingled with hers and new life grew within her, she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. In the years that followed, the Keller ranch prospered. Their first child, a daughter named Eliza after Isaac's first love, a gesture that moved Zara deeply, was joined by two brothers. The small classroom expanded into a proper schoolhouse that served children from miles around. Isaac's cattle herd grew, as did his reputation as one of the most successful and fair ranchers in the territory. Sometimes, travelers passing through would hear the story of how the educated Eastern lady had come to be the beloved wife of rancher Isaac Keller. The tale of the auction and Isaac's bold claim was repeated, embellished, and passed along, becoming something of a local legend. But for Zara and Isaac, the true story was written daily in the life they built together, in the laughter of their children, the growth of their ranch, and in the quiet moments when their eyes would meet across a room, still filled with the wonder of having found each other against all odds in the vast, wild frontier.